Welcome, this is episode 7 and it's Squarespace Typography Secrets Part 2. So in the previous video, in Part 1, I covered how many typefaces should you use, a wonderful rule for choosing typefaces in terms of serif and sans serif, and I also went into a little bit of accessibility with color contrast. So if you haven't checked that video out, please have a look. There is some good stuff in there. So number 1 is letter spacing. That's what we're covering first here. So if we look at the examples there, the default the first brilliant heading is default, and there's no letter spacing on there. The second one, I've put a -1 on there. It just looks a little bit slightly edgier effect in that, and that's certainly an option you can do. I would say in most instances you want to leave letter spacing as is, but there is some occasions that you can experiment with it and you just improve your typography. So it's letter spacing, that's the first one. Number 2 is line height. Generally that's a heading, there are 2 headings there, mission targets for Scotland, and the first example is a line height of 1.5, and if you look at the second example, it's just much more readable. It just looks a lot more cohesive, the second example, and that's got a line height of 1.2. So 1.2 is generally about what you want to kind of set your headings for. And if we look at paragraph text, it's kind of the opposite there. What we want to do is try and set it about 1.5, which is the bottom example, and 1.2 is on the top, and that's just, it's too tight. It's quite hard to read that. It just doesn't look that great, and you want to really get your typography to breathe. And by giving it a line height of 1.5 on the second or the bottom example there, it just looks so much better and just so much more readable. Number 3 is spacing. If we look at the examples here, I want you to concentrate on the mission targets, the headline there, and look at the spacing difference between the top left example and the bottom right example. There's just about double the space there between the end of the paragraph and the start of the mission targets, and that just looks so much better because that then says to people the paragraph that's following is related to the heading, and on the top there's kind of equal space and you don't really know. It's just a little bit lost there, I would say. So always what you can try and do is if you add 2 parts margin on the top and 1 part on the bottom, that's generally not a bad rule to go for when you're spacing your headings there, but I'm sure you can see the difference there. The second example is just so much cleaner and it just makes a lot more sense. So line length, if we look at the example there on the top, that's around about, I think it's 95 characters there, and it's just too long. And if we look at the second example, I think it's around about 65 characters there, and that just looks so much better. The problem with long line lengths is if you really get long, you're struggling to actually, when you go back to the following line, it's kind of hard to track with your eye, and it just doesn't look particularly great. So try and aim for about 60-65 characters. I think the general guidelines 45 to 75, but I think about 60-65 characters per line. It just is a big improvement, that. So with how to get proper line length is simply to use media queries and either use what you can see there, the max width 900 pixels. That's going to be different depending on what your design is, but you would just count the number of characters and adjust your maximum width to adjust the number of characters on each line, or you can do it with font size. That's the 2 simplest ways to do that. And you'd probably have a number of media queries there, probably working from the way up and just going up into your different screen sizes and adjusting your max width or your font size. And that's a brief example there. I'm sure you get the idea in the CSS. Once you've kind of written one, you'll get a good idea how to do that. But that's generally the best way to kind of control the number of characters and the line length on your Squarespace sites. Okay, that concludes this video. Look out for part 3. I will get that out in the next couple of days. Thanks for watching, and if you want to check the code there, copy and paste, it's probably best taken from the mediasurgery.co.uk website, and you can see the full notes there as well for this video episode. Okay, thanks for watching. Talk soon.